Given that our hearts and minds continue to be 6,000 miles away with our brothers and sisters in Israel, I ask everyone to please rise. We'll recite 2 chapters of Tehillim. Begin with chapter 121. Shir Lamalos, the Sinai Le'arim Yainivo Ezri. Ezri Meim Adonai, Yosef Shemayim. Alitim Amarapacha, Yanimu Shomrecha. Hey, lo Yanimu lo Yisha, Shomer Yisrael. Tzayad Yamha. Mama Shemesh lo Yafer. Aishmur Famiko Raishmur Asnashefa. Aishmur Sisfa Tabi Adallah. Till Kuflam at 1:30. Shira Malos, Mamakim Grasifa Adonai. Shema Bikuli, Timus Netha Kashmos Botach Adonai. Imamanos Tishmoria Adonai Miyamo. Kimcha Slicha Anti. Isi Araki Sanashi Bili Baruch Alti. Avshila Naimi Shomim Laboker, Shomim Laboker. Echel Yisrael El Adonai, Imanai Chesed Rabbi Mofidus. Who Yivdes Yisrael, Mikol Avonosai. Yisrael Nusins Avishiyom Bimei Shalom Akum Merachem Aleinu. Sarah Berachom Yafil Romish Bilula. Ashtav Aglav Zman Karev Namar Amen. Please be seated and give your attention to Mike Franklin.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. 2 years ago, a few weeks before Pesach, our rabbi wrote an article about different thoughts on continuing Yom HaShoah and the activities that surround it, with an article entitled, "What is the future of Yom HaShoah?" Specifically, he said, because many programs have been struggling to get meaningful attendance at their Yom HaShoah programs and have not succeeded in a broad buy-in to observe Yom HaShoah in any meaningful way, especially in light of the atrocities of October 7th, which ongoing war has cost so many lives since, and that in light of this, will it be more or less likely that people will show up and care about Yom HaShoah this year? Personally, as a survivor, I agree with the rabbi's first comment thereafter in that article, in which he said that in magnitude and severity, the Holocaust is categorically different from every other persecution or genocide in all human history. As far as I'm concerned, regardless of what had or is happening in Israel or around the world today, or in the years to come, we owe it to our parents, grandparents, and great-grandparents who did or did not survive, as well as our children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, to remember and point out to all what took place during this horrific period in the 30s and 40s, if for no other reason than to look at what has emerged from the ashes of the Holocaust. Not only the state of Israel, but the millions of Jews learning, praying, and supporting Jewish institutions around the world, as well as holding meaningful positions in everyday life, business, and politics. At a time when the Shoah was an everyday discussion, as the world learned each day during the 40s and 50s what the Nazis had perpetrated against us and our people, there were many people, both survivors and children of survivors, who gave up on their God. They could not understand how he allowed this to happen. But after time and understanding, comments from our worldwide rabbinate and those people who fervently believed in their God, slowly but surely, Many people who turned their backs on Yiddishkeit came back. My father, no matter how dark the outlook was, after we were taken away by the Gestapo, always believed and spoke of B'tochen, faith and hope and emunah in Hashem. He fostered these convictions throughout our many dark days in Europe and our years of travail to finally come to America. In addition, even after many years in America, he never forgot, always remembering his strong belief in B'tochen. By the way, Israelis pronounce it bitachon, but to my father's generation, it was always B'tochen. I always remember the pleasure and the satisfaction of this B'tochen when the tears rolled down his cheeks many years ago when I presented him with my invitation to President Lyndon Johnson's inauguration. He broke down because he looked at this as a miracle and emunah in Hashem, considering that not too many years prior, we had arrived in America with nothing but $4, prayers, and B'tochen coming from a world where Jews would be the last to be invited to such events, and especially an Orthodox Jew. In those days, there were not too many Jews, let alone Orthodox Jews, active in national politics, which reminds me of something the late Senator Joe Lieberman once told me. My son lives in Stamford, Connecticut, and for many years, my family and I davened in his shul on Rosh Hashanah, and the late Senator Joe Lieberman sat in front of me, and at times we talked and reminisced about Washington, D.C. and Capitol Hill. That day, he told me something interesting. He remembered my comment in another previous conversation a few years prior that over 20 years ago, I was one of only 2 Orthodox Jews on the Hill, the other being a congressman from New York, Herb Tenzer, who only served 1 term in the 60s. He told me that he had Yortzeit coming up, and he inserted a note in his computer looking for people to form a minyan so he could say Kaddish. Within 2 minutes, he had 41 positive replies. That, ladies and gentlemen, tells you also how far we have come since the 40s, 50s, and 60s. The years during and after the Shoah should make us always remember not only where and whom we come from, but who we are, and how the Shoah has not only given us something to remember forever, but also something to strive for in life to do even better. I know there is a question on some of your minds as to what did I do on Capitol Hill. First, I was a lobbyist for the AFL-CIO, then executive assistant to the congressman at large from the state of Ohio, which was like being a senator since your constituency was statewide. And then I was appointed special counsel to the vice president, Hubert Humphrey. Not something you would have expected from an Orthodox Jewish boy in the 60s, let alone an immigrant. While it seems like yesterday, it was actually 60 years ago. It is also amazing, as Joe Lieberman certainly illustrated, how far we have come in this country when he was chosen as a vice presidential candidate on a national ticket. But also equally amazing how quickly the world, including many elements in this country, seem to be backtracking to the anti-Semitism that prevailed in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and even 60s in America. Let us remember always to have B'tochen and emunah in Hashem, and continue to work through these crazy times as well, so we can have a better world for ourselves, our children, our grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, today and for many years to come. As has been our custom over the years, we have memorial candles laid out to memorialize the 6 million who perished in the Shoah. I would like to first call up all the survivors in our gathering here tonight to light a candle. Do everything else but turn. I think it behooves us all to stand up and applaud these survivors who have gone through so much, fulfilled their lives, and are still with us today. Next, I would like to call up the children of survivors to light a candle. Think of this as you see them and the next generation lighting candles. The survivors not only survived and rebuilt their lives, but gave birth to many future generations.
Pass it out to the next person.
I would now like to call up the next generation, the grandchildren of survivors and great-grandchildren of survivors, and any of their relatives. Good to see you. I now call up our Moradi Astra, Rabbi Ephraim Goldberg. Right now, I think he's operating as a fireman.
Thank you, Mike, for your powerful words and your personal reflections, for your leadership. We give you and Barbara a bracha. You should lead, inspire, and share with us for many, many years to come in good health. Thank you to Rabbi Moskowitz, to our custodian, to Moshe, for all who put our programs together so that we can simply show up and find meaning in them. As Mike referenced, one can't help but wonder the future of Yom HaShoah. In some ways, feeling the focus of the Holocaust, the aftermath of October 7th, and the ongoing conflict since then, the rise of anti-Semitism, in some ways there's more recent tragedy that's on the front burner for the Jewish people. But in others, it's because of that it remains as, and maybe more significant than ever for us to remember. As was referenced, the number of survivors who step up to light these candles has dwindled. Those who did tonight we're in awe of, we love and we bless you, that you should inspire us and be part of our community for many years to come. The stories like we're going to hear tonight, and pressing pause for 24 hours in our busy lives and schedules, especially post-Pesach, just as we're going back to life, is still critically important. To know where we were and where we came from is to know where we are. To be motivated, inspired, strengthened for where we are going. So we're in the midst of counting Sfiras HaOmer, the count of the Omer, 49 days that bridge us from Pesach to Shavuos. See on our page turner last night we counted number 11. We'll make our way in our march to Sinai, to Mount Sinai. And there's a law that if a person forgets to count one night, they're out. They cannot continue. The question which is raised, now is not the time to go into in depth, but if we make a blessing every night, it seems to suggest that every night is a separate mitzvah, is a separate commandment. And if so, why? Because one forgets one night, can they not continue? Why are they disqualified? Why are they out? Soloveitchik understood this opinion of the Baha'i, suggested that this halacha, this law of Sfiras HaOmer is much more than just a law. It's not just a detail, but rather it reflects a Jewish understanding and approach, the Jewish consciousness and mindfulness to time altogether. You see, you cannot count if you don't know the previous night. If you omit it, if you left it out, if you failed to remember, then the entire continuum, the account is broken. And even if every night is a separate mitzvah, and that's why we make a separate bracha, but to be considered a count, a continuum, you have to know what came before. To know what today means, I know, and it's built on what came yesterday. With a mind for what is going to come, what I'm going to count, how I will be counted tomorrow. We don't see each day in isolation, and we don't view each day apart, and we don't live only for now. And we're not the first generation to have gone through challenging times. But Sfiras HaOmer is a reminder, we are on a continuum. We're part of the count. That which came before has to be part of our consciousness. We have to be mindful of it. That's the count. It's part of our count. It's the foundation that we build on to make the next day count. We used to think about yesterday's number, to know what day we count today, and to be mindful, to empower, to ensure that the count continues tomorrow. Tragically, the lessons of the Holocaust, the pledge and the promise of never again, in such a relatively short span of history, has been forgotten by so many. How could the German Chancellor today, on the eve of Yom HaShoah, the German Chancellor chose to release a statement critical of Israel for its treatment of the Palestinians? Today, on the eve of Yom HaShoah, the German Chancellor is going to reprimand, he's going to give Musar, reproach to the Jewish people. We're living in a time where too many have weaponized the Holocaust and the Shoah. They've appropriated our language and our experience to be used against us, to accuse us of the atrocities, as Mike said, that stand alone in history. Words that should be reserved only for one experience and one people and one victim, and that is the Jewish people and the Holocaust. And as we pause and remember the past, we have to be mindful of the present, the pledge and promise for that future, to stand strong, to translate that experience, that pain, those lost, what these candles represent, into our resilience and resolve to support our beloved state of Israel. Our holy soldiers of the IDF, of Israel's Air Force. As we look at these candles, they're flying, fighting in Lebanon, risking their lives, ready to resume what's necessary to wipe out the genocidal existential threat to Israel of our time. What a remarkable and extraordinary time we live in. That we can tell the German Chancellor exactly where he can go and where he can put his remarks. That we won't be reprimanded or reproached. We won't be told. But today, tonight, it's about honoring the Kedoshim, the holy 6 million who gave their lives, who lost their lives, who were murdered in cold blood simply because they were Jews. Tradition we have that they now sit next to the Kisei HaKavod, a special place next to the throne of the Almighty Himself. We just read in this past week's Parsha the story of two who were consumed by a fire, abruptly extinguished in the prime of their lives, the sons of Aaron. Moshe tries to comfort his brother by saying, Bikrovai Ekadesh, that God is sanctified by those with whom He is closest. Bikrovai Ekadesh, Ekadesh Kedoshim. We don't understand and we certainly can't explain or comprehend, but we know the 6 million souls who these candles and lights represent, Bikrovai, they're next to God in the throne of His glory. Parsha describes that the remaining sons of Aaron are called Hanosarim. They're the survivors, they remain, and they carry the sacred duty. If those who are no longer here are Kedoshim, if they're holy, then it's a sacred duty to tell their story. Aaron, when he learns of their tragic loss, famously by Yidom Aaron, he responds with a silence. We don't know the nature of that silence. Was it submission? Was it acquiescence? Was the silence because he gave up? We don't know the nature of his silence. But he was able to find faith even while he was silent. There are times and there are people who lead and inspire us, survivors in this room, and I would say their children. With a silent faith, continue to build and march the community we enjoy in the Jewish people. But with all the challenges we face, in so many ways is exploding. Growth spiritually and in population in so many ways because by Yidom Aaron, because those who silently maintained their faith and turned and pivoted to build. But there are those who, while without challenging God and maintaining incredible faith, remain silent in some ways. They continue to speak in others. And that's our honor and privilege tonight, to welcome Judith Kallman to our community. Mrs. Kallman, thank you so much for making the trip and for being with us. It means the world to us that you chose our community to be in, that you made this trip special, and most of all, that you'll stand up here to tell a story that each time you share must open so many wounds and see it both be so very painful for you. Mrs. Kallman is the grandmother, Stephanie Perry Friedman of Stephanie. She told me that's why she's here, so we're grateful to you, Stephanie, for getting your grandmother to come. It's an extraordinary story, and it's one that we're so grateful that you tell. Faith, grandmother, great-grandmother, please God, continued to share simchas in generations for many years to come. But as you, in this way, in sharing your story, refuse to stay silent, so must we. My daughter, just yesterday, we have on both of our cars still the magnet that says America stands with Israel, with both flags on the side of our car. One of my daughters just yesterday at the gas station closest to Montoya Circle was filling her car. The car went by and saw the magnet, lowered the window, screamed several things, including Free Palestine at her. Our enemies have found their voices again. They stayed silent for 75 plus years. In the shadow of the Holocaust, they found their voice. And so must we. There are times and there are ways we stay silent. And there are moments and responsibilities to raise our voice. And Yom HaShoah reminds us of that responsibility. Mrs. Kallman reminds us of that responsibility to tell the story, but also to learn from it and to ensure that we stand up for our people, to provide for a peaceful and a better future. It's a great honor to call up Mrs. Kallman to share her story with us this evening.
So forgive me. I stand before you today, humbled by my role as a Holocaust survivor and as a spokesperson of those who perished during the World War II. People who were killed because of their religious beliefs, their political leanings, and their race and nationality. To describe the breadth of those millions and millions, both in numbers and in terms of what they individually and collectively would have contributed to the world, is too enormous a task for any one person. Instead, I would like to take this opportunity to share my own experience and allow you to imagine over and over again the stories of those who survived and those who did not. Today, on Yom HaShoah, Holocaust Remembrance Day, we remember those millions from every walk of life that we tragically lost. We remember those who were in the camps and hiding. And we remember the children, those who were given to others for safekeeping, and the children whose lives were snuffed out before they understood what was stolen from them. More than 1.5 million Jewish children were slaughtered by our enemies. I was almost one of them. My story is the story of a child who was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and yet, with faith and hope, I found courage to survive. I was the youngest of 6 children, 3 brothers and 3 sisters, born to parents of German and Hungarian descent. The roots of our family tree spread from Czechoslovakia to Hungary and beyond. It was the comfort of aunts, uncles, many cousins that created a hub of belonging. My father was the owner of dry goods store in Pišťany, Czechoslovakia, that had been started by his father, and my mother was the winner of the beauty pageant in her hometown. I was born in a tapestry of Jewish traditions, a lifestyle, and respect for the government people. My father interacted with people of every spectrum, from the fabric manufacturers to the local peasants whom my father extended credit when times were difficult. In this setting, who could foresee that Hitler's hate inspired influence would extend into the neighboring countries and poison their inhabitants? Nevertheless, as young and protected as I was aware of the seeds of fear growing around me. It started as the small things a child would notice only when looking back, the trips to the park that were no more. My brother coming home from school with bloody face, new shoes that had to be buried to make them look old, and finally, when we were not allowed to go beyond our own locked front gate. Until then, Shabbat was our day of peace. It began Friday evening with my mother's lighting the candles as we surrounded her in the glowing light and a Father blessing us one by one. This stayed with me always. This is the framework of my memories, but it was short-lived. The terror entered the home on a Friday night when our Shabbat table sparkled with 8 candles representing our family. Rocks were thrown through the window, one after another, and we hid under our table to protect ourselves. And before we knew it, we were fleeing for our lives. In the fall or winter of 1941, my father arranged for us to hide in a peasant farmhouse in the nearby countryside. Day and night we stayed completely hidden, especially when the Linker soldiers came to visit. We had to remain as quiet as possible until they left. One particular evening, as the soldiers lingered, drinking and laughing with the peasants, I needed to use the bathroom and could not wait much longer. Mama allowed me to sneak out the back door to the outhouse beyond the barn. The outhouse contained a hole in the floor with a wall beyond the barn floor, and it contained the floor with a wall of crudely nailed together planks and another plank nailed flat across the top to form a sort of seat. It was situated over a stream to carry the sewage away. I was a small, skinny child and struggled to get to the top of the seat. When I tried to turn around, I lost my balance and fell backwards into the opening. Panic-stricken, I find myself caught in a foul-smelling underground current that was pulling me under and under. I screamed, but no one was there to hear me. I sensed that if I did not help myself, I would be lost forever, drowning in that horrible sinkhole. I reached up, but every time I thought I could grab a plank with my fingers, I lost the grip and fell back. Again I tried. Then quite suddenly, in the dim of gray light, I I spotted a nail sticking out of that slimy wall. I reached up and grabbed it as it were waiting for me. I clutched it and began to climb, going from one nail to the other. The nails were rusty and bloodied my fingers, but I never felt the pain, for it was truly as if somebody was there helping me, a source of strength well beyond my own. I remember thinking, I have to survive. I cannot die in this field. I must live. I must live. Finally, I succeeded in lifting myself out of the opening and knew I was truly fit. I was sick. I truly believe it was God's hand that reached down that day to lift my arm, my hope, my faith, and my determination. I'm convinced that God guided me to the nails that served as my ladder to life. After that, my parents never let me out of their sight, but we were asked to leave the farm and became refugees, running from place to place, trying to hide from what was coming at us. Finally, we settled in Žilina and lived as non-Jews. Soon thereafter, our story as a family shattered when the SS guards entered our makeshift apartment where we were hiding as non-Jews and demanded our identification papers. I was home with my parents, and to this day I see my image as a young child looking into the shiny and glossy boots of the soldiers. They took our family papers to the local Gestapo office and returned later that day to arrest us as they confirmed that the papers were indeed false. I was in school with my 3 siblings when my parents were arrested with my other brother and sister. Imagine for a moment being 5 years old, being told by a stranger that your parents were taken and you are now a fugitive. It was unimaginable and did not become my reality till my brother and I went to the train station to see our parents being deported to Auschwitz. We saw the cattle car blowing its black smoke from its deck as it idled in the station, and then watched in fear as our parents and siblings were pushed onto it. I was only a child and wanted the safety I had always known in the warm bosom of my family. When Papa caught sight of my brother and me trying to reach out to him, his face turned ashen with fear. He yelled at us, urging us to follow the prime directive of Judaism. Choose life, he cried. Go away, he screamed at my brother and me. Do not get on this train. Go away and live. Choose life, he shouted from a distance. I began to cry. Papa, Papa, and a lingered God put a gun to my head and told me, shut up. I understood immediately what my father meant. The instinct for survival surfaced in me again. Dazed with confusion, my heart breaking with loss, terrified of the future, as young as I was, I understood that I wanted to live. Papa had done so much to try to keep us all alive, even in that very last moment, the last time my brother and I were ever to see him, he bravely and nobly urged life on us. Little did I realize then, but now I understand that this terrible God, who literally put a gun to my head, had saved my life by making me quiet. The day I lost my parents was the day my childhood abruptly ended. Life stopped when the train pulled away. Taking with it, I thought, the very core of me. I hoped that my parents would come back and get me. This was my fantasy one I held on well to my teenage years, for I simply could not grasp the concept of never ever seeing my parents again. I was too young to understand the finality of death, but I was not too young to feel abandoned and lost. I was not too young to know that my security blanket was gone, that the loving and protective shelter my parents had constructed around me was shattered. My journey as a 5-year-old fugitive in war-torn Europe continued after my family's deportation. My father's sister owned a major estate near the city of Nitra in Czechoslovakia and was very influential. She arranged to have my brother and me smuggled into Budapest, Hungary. I could not understand what was happening, only that we were on the run again. We were passed along from person to person, peasant to peasant, until we were just a few miles from the Hungarian border. Late at night, I overheard our rescuers talking about how they would take my brother to comparative safety, but would leave me behind because they believed I was too little to make such a dangerous trek through the snow. I fought loud and hard for the right to stay with my brother. I held on to him and never let go of his hand. As I walked with my brother through the snow and cold, facing precious thoughts, I imagined that I would finally be safe in the embrace of my maternal aunt and her family. But the awful reality was, when we were brought to her door, she had no choice but to turn us away. Too terrified to take us in, because the government threatened to kill entire families if they protected the refugees. Unable to take us back to Czechoslovakia, the peasant woman abandoned us on a park bench in the city, where the police found us, locked us up in the notorious County Street prison. There we languished among the criminals, life-ridden and hungry for weeks, until a Jewish watchmaker managed to get a permit to bring us to his home on the last night of Hanukkah 1942. When we arrived, we had come home. It was a Cinderella moment. When the clock struck the hour, we were taken back to the prison. But the kindly watchmaker promised we would be saved, and so we were. An amazing couple, Mr. and Mrs. Stern, who owned the most popular kosher restaurant in Budapest, were famous for their rescue work, adopted me and reunited me with my siblings, making us a family again. The Sterns enveloped me in love, security, warmth, and comfort, and saw to it that I left for nothing. I thrived. I was a child again, doing what children do, going to school and playing. But in March 1944, the safe haven was violated. The terror began again when the Germans occupied Hungary and moved very quickly to kill its Jews. My adopted parents went into hiding in the glass house, a glass-making factory which was under the protection of the Swiss Red Cross and its diplomat Karl Lutz. During the daytime, we lived underground in bitter cold conditions, and only at night we dared to go out for a breath of fresh air. The safety of the glass house was but an illusion. One night, Black Arrow fascists discovered a hiding place. They dragged us out in the cold night, lined us up, and began shooting. I was holding onto my father's hand as the shots came closer and closer. I decided before it would be my turn, I would drop to the ground and make believe I was dead. Only God saved us from the execution, as the Swiss Red Cross arrived and put an end to the massacre. Against all odds, we survived the horrors of the Holocaust. After liberation by the Russian army and the death of my adoptive mother, my life began again, filled with challenges. I became very sick from hiding in the freezing tunnels and contracted lung disease. Mr. Stern remarried, and his new wife did not want to take care of me. They sent me to a sanitarium in the Tatra Mountains in Czechoslovakia to recuperate. I was an orphan yet again. After I was cured, I was placed in a Jewish orphanage, but educated in a convent where the Catholic nuns were loving, welcoming, and hoping we would all convert to Christianity. In late 1947, my aunt arranged for me to leave Eastern Europe on a kinder transport to London, organized by Rabbi Dr. Solomon Shumper. When my best friend Eva heard the news of my leaving, she began to cling to me and sob uncontrollably. The reaction drew an instant question from the rabbi. Why are you crying? As the tears rolled down her rosy cheeks, Eva explained, because my best friend is leaving, because we share everything, because Judith taught me the Shema prayer, and she is my connection to Judaism. She said, I should learn the prayer and that saying it would give me a lot of strength. It happened to be true. I taught Eva the Shema because I truly felt that way about it. It was one of the few remnants of Judaism that had remained with me after God had intervened and saved me. Quietly reciting the Shema in bed each night was a great comfort to me and a source of strength and inspiration. Eva, who could not remember ever being taught anything about Judaism, loved to recite the prayer with me in the orphanage. What neither of us realized was just how much that story resonated with the Rabbi Dr. Shumper. This was the last hindered transport he could take out of Europe, and he agreed to take Eva to England with me again. I was not yet 11 years old, but then, as all 150 children on that train did, that we were moving towards better life. Rabbi Shumper promised us wonderful new beginning, that we would be safe and protected. I received an excellent education and made many friends in London. A few years later, I was anxious to be reunited with my sibling, 3 surviving siblings living in Israel. I traveled by boat to Israel, and on my arrival, I was placed in a DP camp. You may be wondering what happened to my best friend Eva. From the complete fortunate interaction with Rabbi Shelfer, Eva went on to live a full, happy life in England as a mother to 10 children. Together with her husband, they started and ran a school for Jewish children who came from troubled homes. My tale is a tapestry woven from the kindness of people who rescued me by resisting the fear, hate, and lies Germans planted. It is an example of how a child is resilient enough to survive and still have sheer determination to live a full and happy life. It is about a child's instinct, faith, and hope. Life is about always moving forward, yet remembering one's roots. For me, it is all about the memory of my mother's Shabbat candle. There are now the candle in my heart that illuminates my journey. I owe many thanks to the people who saved me. The aunt embraced me in the wake of my parents' death. The parents who risked all to take me over to the border. The Jewish watchmaker who plucked me from prison. The amazing couple who rescued me from the hell of jail and to give me love, security, and a home. And the nun in the Catholic school who gave me education, warmth, and love. How can I ever thank Dr. Rabbi Shampa, who rescued me from the inferno of Eastern Europe, took me on the last Hindu transport to England, and who gave direction to my young life. And lastly, I thank the state of Israel and its inhabitants. We were a generation that was tainted, yet had survived. We were pioneers in optimism, and valued the task to live that our parents were deprived of. I stand before you today, not only as a survivor, but as someone who was given the opportunity to choose life in the face of darkness. All those years ago, and everything around me was taken, I made a choice to live, to endure, to believe that there could still be a future ahead of me. And from that choice came a miracle. Today, I look at my children, my grandchildren, my great-grandchildren, including those in this BRS community, living lives of Torah, of purpose, of faith, and I see a world that once seemed impossible. A world rebuilt from ashes and a legacy that no hatred could destroy. It is a dream and a gift from God that I could never have imagined, and I feel blessed every single day to live it. But I not live only for myself. I live carrying the memory of my parents, my siblings, and all those who did not survive. Their lives continue through mine and through all of us. So tonight, as we commemorate Yom HaShoah, I ask to remember them and live for them. Build, grow, thrive, and cherish every moment. Because the greatest victory over darkness is light. Am Yisrael Chai.
רחמים שוכן במרומים אמצי מנוחה נכונה על כנפי השכינה במעלות קדושים וטהורים כזוהר כי המסירים את נשמות הקדושים והטהורים שהומסו ושנהרגו ושנשחטו ושנשרפו ושנתו ושנחנכו על קידוש השם בעבור שבלי נדר אתן צדקה בהזכרת נשמותיהם בגן עדן תהא מנוחתם לכן בעל הרחמים יסתירם בסתר כנפיו לעולמים ויצרור בתורה חיים את נשמותיהם אדוני הוא נחלתם וינוחו בשלום במשפחותיהם ונאמר אמן. Join me in the singing of that song.
Thank you all for coming. There'll be a Mara meeting in the back in a few minutes.